Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. We're in chapter 38, this is 38c, and this one is Joseph, Origins. הללו את אדוני כל גויים, שבחו כל האומים, כי גבר עלינו חסדו ואמת אדוני לעולם, hallelujah. Rabbi Ishmael says, every son of old age is favored by his father, as said in Genesis 37:3. And Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons because he was a son of his old age, and he made him a fine woolen coat, or a kutonet pasim, with stripes. We're not getting into the striped coat right now. There already lies our first problem. As we have covered this specific topic many times before, we've discussed the story of Joseph, right? When a parent shows favoritism, it can throw the entire family dynamic off balance. Now, I'm sure all parents have a favorite, and although they genuinely try to hide it, kids can feel it, right? And then the parents have no idea why they're acting out. What's the matter? Well, how do you explain to a parent, subconsciously, I know you favor my brother or my sister over me? Is a problem. Then when kids grow up and become wiser and more aware of their surroundings, they actually understand what's going on. Their memories of growing up in a home where mom or dad or both had a favorite and it wasn't them will clearly remember and see all the signs along the way. They'll be like, oh wow, it's totally true. Now I understand my trauma. Now I understand why I don't really trust people or authority figures, and so on and so forth. Okay, parents, please be very aware of this. And now our text asks the question we should have all been asking. Was Joseph the son of his old age? Meaning, his youngest son of his old age. Benjamin was the son of his old age. We know this. He was the youngest and the only remaining child he had from his beloved Rachel. Even Judah called him as such in Genesis 44:20. And we said to my Lord, when he's talking to Joseph before he knows it's Joseph, we have an old father and a young child of his own age, ve'yeled zekunim. This is exactly the same language in Hebrew. A child of his old age, and his brother is dead, and he's left alone of his mother, and his father loves him. In other words, they already know that now Jacob favors Benjamin over all of them, but based on the whole thing that happened with Joseph, and when they actually saw what they did to their father, they're like, that's fine. He should not favor any of us, right? They were walking around with this guilt their entire lives. It's okay if he doesn't favor any of them. So this obviously is not as simple as it may sound. Nevertheless, let's take a listen. But rather, says Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, Jacob saw in prophecy that Joseph would indeed rule, and that's why he loved him more than the rest of his sons. So in other words, it's not that yes, he loved him more, but he loved him based on how, I'm trying to think of how to put this into play, right? If you know your son is going to be a king, you have more love for him. It's a sense of fatherly pride, not a personal proud, but a fatherly pride. And he saw what Joseph could become, so there was more of him to love. We'll say it like that, right? For instance, okay, here we go. Yeah, something just popped into my head. If you have 2 kids or 3 kids, and one of them is, how shall we say, calorically challenged, okay? One of them is a big one, right? And the big one eats twice the amount of the other kids. You're going to feed him that much. So it's like, wait, Dad, why are you giving him more food than us? Because he needs it. Something like that, okay? All right. That's not bad. Okay, we'll go with that. Still not an excuse, but it's not about the son of his old age anymore here. It's rather a combination of both statements with the meaning a bit different. What Jacob saw was that Joseph would take care of him in his old age, meaning Joseph was his pension, his security blanket. In his old age, in Jacob's old age, which in fact it did happen. The last 17 years of Jacob's life, Joseph completely took care of him and his brothers and all of Egypt and all the world. Jacob understood this through Ruach HaKodesh, which is why he had a connection with him. Also, Joseph is Yesod. Jacob is Tiferet. When Tiferet and Yesod are together, there is crazy abundance going on, which is exactly what happened in Egypt. So, it wasn't that he didn't rely on God. Jacob didn't rely on God. To the contrary, this was the prophecy that God gave him. which is why he believed God. You understand? It wasn't his own understanding. He understood this. He got this, right? That's why he believed what he did. This is also why he took it so hard when he got the word that Joseph was killed. Because what did that mean of his relationship with God? But God, you told me this, you showed me this, now Joseph is dead. His entire world fell apart, right? It makes sense now. Did he have a wrong understanding within a very clear prophecy? The loss of Joseph was more detrimental to Jacob than the loss of Rachel, it would seem. Since he did get over Rachel, but our text says that he refused to be comforted regarding Joseph. No way, Jose. Anyway, back to our timeline. Joseph is Jacob's favorite. And they envied him with a great envy, v'kin'u bo kin'a gdola, as said in verse 4. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers. So they hated him, right? The first envy was because they saw that he loved him more, and because he, Jacob, saw his dream, in Joseph's dream, that he is going to rule. And he told his father, and so they added envy atop of envy, as said, so they hated him. So first, they saw that he loved him more, and then they saw what their father, through the prophecy, that their father already favored him more when he was divulging the dreams. Then that envy turned into hate. But now we also have to break this part down as we see envy and now we see hate. This is already coming from two groups of the brothers. When Joseph saw the sons of his father's concubines eating the flesh of the roes, deer or venison, and the flesh of the sheep whilst they were alive, and he spoke evil against them before Jacob their father, so that they could not see his face anymore in peace, as said in verse 4. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, so they hated him. Now to add insult to injury, and they could not speak with him peacefully. Done. They're done with Joseph. Okay, so let's unpack this all, shall we? Now, if you don't know this, Joseph was not perfect. I know if you're coming from the other religions, you think, oh, the blameless and Joseph wept. You get it, right? No, this is not where we're at. Because if Joseph was perfect, he would not have anything to work towards. When he was a young teen, he ran his mouth. He walked around unaware of the impact of his words and his actions. The Torah says this. The Word of God says this. So who are you arguing with here? The Torah clearly states that he spoke evil of his brothers to his father. This is evil speech, and it's one of the worst sins that you can do. It's under murder, because you're killing a person's name. You're killing them while they're still alive. If he would have investigated what his brothers were actually doing, he would have come to a very different conclusion than what he did. And then he would not have spoken anything to his father regarding his brothers. All you have to do is to investigate. We know that eating the flesh of a live animal is absolutely a Torah prohibition, as it says in Deuteronomy 12:23. One of the 613 mitzvot. However, be strong not to eat the blood, for the blood is the soul, and you shall not eat the nefesh with the flesh. Right? Don't eat the animal while it's still alive, while the blood is still flowing through it. But furthermore, what is so special about this prohibition? Eating the flesh off a live animal. This is one of the 7 Noahide laws. Genesis 9:4. But flesh with the nefesh, its blood, you shall not eat. So this is a basic command for all of humanity, let alone the sons of Jacob. Now, we all know that the children of Jacob were righteous, unlike Ishmael from Abraham and Esau from Isaac. Jacob was the best of the best, and our sages say, Shlema haita mitato shel Yaakov. Jacob's bed, quote unquote, meaning his offspring, were complete, perfect, whole. Shlema, shalem, shalom, peace, shalem, complete, shlomo. Yes, also King Shlomo, King Solomon, but it is also referring to God as Hamelech Shehashalom Lo, the king to which brings peace. In fact, it is of Jacob that Solomon writes in Song of Songs 4:7. You are all fair, my beloved, and there is no blemish in you, meaning in Jacob. This is God speaking to Israel over here. No blemish. In other words, Jacob's children were perfect. Thus saith the Lord. Said God to his beloved Israel, if this is the case, then how could the sons of Jacob possibly have transgressed not only a Torah prohibition, but also a Noahide command, right? We already, in this instance, if we don't understand, we give them the benefit of the doubt that there's more to this story than we can read over here, because the Torah says that clearly he spoke evil speech of them. You see, okay, that's your hall pass for the world to come, these commands. What Joseph should have done for starters is judge his brothers favorably, like we said, meaning always giving them the benefit of the doubt, no matter how bad it may look. Case in point, he messed up big time here. Leviticus 19:15 says, you shall commit no injustice in judgment. You shall not favor a poor person or respect a great man. You shall judge your fellow with righteousness. Betzedek tishpot amitecha. You need to understand the facts. You need to look at the facts. The only way to do this properly is with all the facts lay out before you. And our sages went even further with the explanation on this in Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot 1:6. Yoshua ben Prachia and Ittai the Arbelite received the oral tradition from them, meaning from those that came before. Just read the chapter before if you're interested. Joshua ben Prachia used to say, Yoshua ben Prachia used to say, appoint for thyself a teacher, and acquire for thyself a companion, and judge all men with the scale weighed in his favor. In other words, Joseph knows these are my brothers. I know them. They are the sons of Jacob. Though this may not seem right, before I go, hey, Dad, I'm telling, before that happened, go to them, say, What's up, guys? What are we doing here? And they would have showed him and explained to him the answer, which was very simple. We'll get into that. And when we judge our fellow man favorably, giving them the benefit of the doubt, then we too will be judged in the same manner by our Heavenly Father. This is especially now for that we're in the time of Elul. When we judge our fellow man favorably, they probably didn't. We're being lenient even with them. We're not paying back retribution to what we technically could. This is how then heaven gives back to us favorably. This is how we should judge everyone. You see? Okay. So really, what went down here? It was a Friday night, and the sons of Jacob were learning from the book of formation written by their grandfather, Abraham, Sefer HaYetzirah. Within this book, and you could get a copy of it at, anywhere, right? It's in English, it's in Hebrew. But in this book are great and terrible secrets. Secrets that allow you to form things out of whatever material. In this case, they created deer and sheep and venison or whatnot. And though they seemed alive and animated to the passerby, in this case, Joseph, they are not at all considered as living beings because they were created through incantations and did not come about naturally. Very simple. They are not considered animals. They are not considered alive. They're considered like a golem. Therefore, the laws of kosher or morality, eating directly off an animal, do not apply to that which is considered, for lack of a better word, a golem. Do we all know the story of the Maharal from Prague who created the golem 500 years ago? Look it up. Maharal from Prague, golem. You'll see the story over there. These things are for real. The point is, as it says in Deuteronomy 13:14-15, even regarding idolatry, unfaithful men have gone forth from among you and have led the inhabitants of their city astray, saying, let us go up and worship other gods which you have not known, right? This we're talking about there. That's what happened. Then you shall inquire, investigate, and ask thoroughly, and behold, it is true. Okay, after you inquire, investigate, and ask thoroughly, v'darashta v'chakarta v'sha'alta heitev. Oh boy, even if someone says, hey, let's go bow down to an idol, let's go off to, worship what's-his-face. Hold on. Go see for yourself. Go investigate for yourself, and behold, it is true. The matter is certain that such abomination has been committed in your midst. Now we judge it appropriately because we have all the facts. That's the point in all things. Even if you think that you saw what you saw or believe you heard what you may have heard, it is an absolute command to judge your brother favorably, though it all worked out according to God's plan. But what Joseph did here is that he brought a correction upon himself. In other words, he brought judgment upon himself, and now he has to do a great correction. But we know that everything that God brings upon us is not to correct that which has been blemished. Usually, God, now hear me out for a moment here, God will trip us up, but only trip us up so that the correction we make, in other words, when we do tshuva properly, let's say if God takes us down a notch, we come back 2, 3, 4, even tenfold. That's the point of this. It's like a sling. Okay. Joseph was to be ruler and savior of the world, but the dude needed some refining. No doubt about that. We're talking about a 17-year-old kid, okay? Which included to be kidnapped, sold into slavery, framed for rape, tossed into prison, then into a dungeon, and then for an extra 2 more years, meaning the 10 plus 2 years, he needed to be refined because he relied on Pharaoh's butler to get him out instead of God, right? We learned this in all the stories of Joseph. So from the time he was 17 to 30 years old, he was put through the ringer. But on Rosh Hashanah, everything changed as he got called up to Pharaoh, and the rest is history. Pharaoh then called Joseph up over there. That was exactly Rosh Hashanah, the day of judgment. Everything with Joseph is regarding judgment. He is on the side of the left. He is the ox. We'll see this also in the upcoming teachings. Now, I know I'm going off here, but there are other things to consider. As I said before, Joseph was absolutely flawed, as were his brothers, as was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as was Moses, and Aaron, and Miriam, as was David, and Solomon, and so on and so forth. That's not the point. It's not, what do you mean they're such great, they're flawed? Yes, of course they're flawed. How else are you going to do tshuva? How else are you going to raise yourself? How else if you're coming out there perfect? You know why? Okay, so yet, it is from these flawed individuals, here we go. It's from these flawed individuals God chose to establish the world and to give the VIP pass, the Torah, to the world to come. You see? Specifically from these flawed individuals. Everyone's a flawed individual, but who's going to overcome these things? That's who God chooses. Everybody's flawed. Who is overcoming? Okay, so here we go. Why does God choose this? Because a perfect character, hear me now and hear what I'm saying. A perfect character does not speak to anyone. A perfect character does not appeal to anyone. In fact, I would say a perfect and flawless character is such a major turnoff that it is rejected by society as a whole. But I am telling you the truth, he said. Still don't believe me? Now get this. I'm going to go bring in some, let's bring in something that everyone in the world, at least people that understand, that understand what's going on, can agree with me. Let's look at some of the greatest movie franchises in history, okay? We have Indiana Jones, we have Star Wars. Look at what Disney did to them. I'm just giving these as examples. You'll see exactly my point in these movies. Okay. The original Star Wars was a story of growth, trial and error, friendship, sacrifice, right? Luke Skywalker was everybody's hero. Who didn't want to be Luke Skywalker? But he started off as an 18-year-old whiny little brat. But I want to power converters. I want to that was him. And you remember this in the beginning of the first Star Wars. Like, who is this kid? And then he kind of stumbles along on the path and he makes mistakes and he might have a W over there, but then he continues and the stories just move on and on. He's a flawed character that continues to build himself up through trial and error. But you're rooting for him, right? Because you can identify with him. There are stakes involved as we watch all the main characters go against their better nature for the sake of the greater good. Luke just wanted to be left alone, right? On Tatooine. But he ended up saving the galaxy through hard work, discipline, and always putting the needs of others above his own. In the end, he didn't even give in to the dark side when he could have. He chose death over turning on his own father, even though his father was the big baddie. But there was a bigger baddie after that. You see what I'm saying? This is character development. These are flawed characters that they overcame their shortcomings. Welcome to reality. Why do you think the movies, the originals, did so well? What about Han Solo? He was a loner, a gunslinger who saved the day as he decided to return and fight for something other than himself. You see, opposites. Avraham and Yitzchak, they had to do... I'm not comparing Avraham and Yitzchak to Luke and Han, understand this, but I'm going from modern culture and in our base nature, what actually appeals to the general public, to mankind today. So pay attention. And now with the new garbage that Disney has put out, right? It has infested the world today. And since Hollywood is the ultimate propaganda machine, we see the agenda as clear as day. Along comes, and again, they're obviously the force is female. You know these things, right? It's a strong, independent woman who don't need no man. That's what it is. A woman could be strong and independent without putting the man down. You have Princess Leia, strong, independent female character, right? So, new Star Wars. Along comes this woman. She has no struggle, who is so overpowered. She makes no mistakes, makes everyone around her, and when I say everyone, I mean exclusively men in this case, look like bumbling idiots. Look at all the new Star Warses. Look at I didn't even watch the last Indiana Jones. I watched the whole commentary on it. I knew it's copy, paste, copy, paste. All of a sudden, Indiana Jones is old and grumbling and bumbling. Han Solo, old, grumbling, bumbling. Along comes a young British chick. What's her face from there and what's her face from there? And they're teaching them how to... It's ridiculous. It doesn't appeal to anybody. That's why people don't like this. That's why these franchises are dead. Because overpowered, perfect, flawless characters appeal to no one. No one. What are you overcoming then? You don't need to put people down to propel yourself. And if you have no struggle, no one can connect with you. This is why it's a dead franchise. Now, copy-paste that formula, like we said, to Indiana Jones, Terminator, The Matrix, and pretty much every Marvel movie, okay? Perfect people appeal to no one. This is proven. The numbers and the industry speaks for itself. The whole thing is coming apart. This whole woke agenda thing is coming apart. No one wants to see a perfect character. And we know the people who do love these perfect individuals have serious problems themselves. You could even draw one. What do the people who actually enjoy this look like? Who did they not vote for? You see what I'm saying? Okay, so now we can agree on that. People don't like perfect characters. They don't appeal to us. Do you understand what I mean here? I certainly hope so. There is a reason, in Judaism anyway, that our messiahs are flawed individuals. Our messiahs are flawed individuals. We've spoken of this so many times, how Mashiach is one of the people for simple sake of the people being able to connect with him and he with them. The Mashiach was not born perfect and has done no wrong as a person throughout his life, but he is a Baal Tshuva, someone who absolutely did very wrong throughout his life, but chose to overcome that and to come back and do tshuva. That is who the Mashiach is. Because his job is to bring people back from where he was. I get you, brother. I was exactly where you were. But someone who comes like this, kiss my feet and you'll be fine. Desperation. And so if Joseph never would have been put through the ringer by God, do you think it would be as compassionate as he was later on, as mature and as forgiving as he was, as understanding as he was, as gentle and as soft as he was, as warm and as inviting as he was, a ruler and leader as he was? God prepared him for this, everything. Who can say such words in Genesis 45:5? But now do not be sad, and do not let it trouble you that you sold me here, for it was to preserve life that God sent me before you. He understood that everything that happened to him, obviously, this was his doing, yes, because there is free will. But like we said, God planned the entire world based on our own free will and on our own actions. He did this, God said, perfectly on point. Everything is going according to plan, right? But only in the good way, obviously. If they did not witness and experience firsthand from the ground up, God's plan unfolding. You see this? They all had to see this. They all had to come from the bottom. If you are all high and mighty, how could you possibly see any of this? But when we are humbled, it is because God wishes to show us what we are standing on. Sometimes it's who we are standing on. And that only happens when we take a bow. That's humility. Joseph had to be humbled. That is why humility is what all our heroes have in common, because it is God and God alone who raises up and lowers down. And if you think that we don't have anything in common with these extraordinary individuals that we read about in the Tanakh, you are so wrong. Look at their flaws and see what they had to overcome. Understand just how big of sacrifices they had to make of their own personal self. Now adjust our time for inflation, and you will see that once upon a time, our father Abraham and Isaac had to go against the very nature that God bestowed upon them in order to be close to him. Was it difficult? Beyond what you and I can even begin to comprehend. Would they go through it again for God's namesake? Do you have to ask? Without question, of course. But today, because of the ever-growing darkness in the world, when we do something small, something good and meaningful, that could be the equivalent of our something great being done thousands of years ago. Did you understand what I just said? Let me break it down even more. The holy Ari, told his student, the Marchu, Rabbi Chaim Vital, he said, and this was 500 years ago, he told him this. He said, because you're reading about the time of the Rashbi, which was 2,000 years ago from our time, 1,500 years ago from their time, and about what all the Tanaim, what all our sages in the Talmud, what they did, the kind of Torah that they had. And the Marchu was like, we're not getting to that kind of level. And the Ari told him, he said, because the world becomes increasingly darker, if you do a small mitzvah in this time, it is compared to our sages from 1,500 years ago back then, 2,000 years ago, our time, doing something great, doing a big, big mitzvah. What are we going to say today? 500 years after this was told to the Marchu, 2,000 years after the time that he referenced, and even 3,000 years, 3,500 years from the time that the Exodus, is that a word? From that time of the Exodus from Egypt. Today, any small thing we do, because it is so that you don't even take yourself for granted when you do any kind of positive thing, any kind of mitzvah. It is amazing what it translates to in the world today. That's why I said adjusted for inflation back in the day of Abraham. Do not underestimate who you are. Do not underestimate your capabilities, let alone your influence in this world. While everything and everyone in this world, all the governing authorities, are trying to tell you to keep you down, that you have no power, that you should be completely dependent on the government is going to take care of you. It's called communism and socialism. It still hasn't worked, okay? But people are still into it for some reason. You know, these are the people that like the latest Star Wars, didn't it? Okay, we are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we are all being tested all the time for the sake of the world. It's for your sake that you're being tested. You want to stay exactly where you are? I promise you, you do not. It is God who alone controls everything, which is why Hannah's prayers, when she wanted Samuel, right? It rings true still till this day. And it is because she recognized God's omnipotence, love, and perfect justice that she was granted that which she desired most. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. The Lord impoverishes and he makes rich. He humbles. He also exalts. God's doing everything. Everything. He lifts the poor from the dust. From the dunghill, he raises the pauper to seat them with princes, and a seat of honor he causes them to inherit. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he placed the world upon them. Mekim me'afar dal. David sang this. Mekim me'afar dal me'ashpot yarim evion le'shivim im nedive amo. Washiv yakeret habayit em habanim semecha. Hallelujah. We say this in the Hallel. Em habanim is the mother of the sons, meaning this is Rachel. Anyway, we're continuing. The feet of his pious, raglei chasidav, of his pious ones, he will guard, and the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by strength will man prevail. Listen up. Those who strive with the Lord will be broken. Let them. That's okay. They're not fighting you, don't you understand? They're fighting God. Let them get out of the way. God does not need you to stand up for him. Okay? He told this to Moses. Are you zealous for me? He told this to Elijah. Are you zealous for me? I got my people. Everything's good. Thank you very much. Do what you need to do. Humbly speaking, I say this. Upon him will he thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth, and he will grant strength to his king and raise the horn of his anointed one, of his Messiah. Her prayers were answered in the form of Samuel, the warrior prophet, the anointer of kings. And if you put this into context, we are all kings and rulers in the making. Where do I get this from? Exodus 19. And you shall be to me a kingdom of princes and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel. We are all being primed and prepped, especially now in this time in history. We are so fortunate to be alive. And we are being tried and we are being challenged in order to fulfill the word of God. Don't you want to help God fulfill his word? He doesn't need you. But he's giving you the opportunity, and it is you who can choose to be part of it or not. Now, it's Joseph's turn. And he spoke evil against them before Jacob their father, so that they could not see his face anymore in peace. Jacob said to Joseph, Joseph, my son, it has been several days since I heard a word of peace from... We're continuing Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. I hope you got that. It has been several days since I heard a word of peace from your brothers and the welfare of the flock, as said in Genesis 37:14. You see, God is the one who put the longing for this peace upon Jacob's heart and gave it upon Joseph's heart. And so he sent Joseph, his favorite son, out on a dangerous journey to find his brothers. And why would Jacob not be worried about something that could have happened, to this 17-year-old boy who was not really used to the outdoors, to send him out there by himself? Because he was the future ruler and a Torah scholar, just like his father was. Why am I afraid for him? God's got this. Indeed, God does, but not in the way that he thought. And Jacob knew that just as Jacob had the angel who redeems him, which obviously we'll see when he blesses his children, Joseph's children later on, who redeems and guides him along the way, there was no reason why Joseph would have not had the same, along with the protection that came with it. Not to mention that Joseph is now a shaliach mitzvah, a mitzvah emissary, a messenger of mitzvah, right? Which gives even more protection on top of it all. That's why we say anybody that flies from Israel outside of Israel, somebody always gives them some money, say, you are now giving this tzedakah. I need you to give this tzedakah to this synagogue or whatever in the States or wherever they're flying. If you fly to Israel, you're already doing a mitzvah because you're coming to Israel. You don't need to be a mitzvah emissary. You are fulfilling what God said in the Torah. Get your butt to Israel. In so many words. Okay? V'haya ki tavo el haaretz. It says it right there in Deuteronomy, from the parsha we just read last week. Okay? Which is why what comes next, Jacob never saw coming, nor would he see it for the next 22 years. So, stay tuned for next week when we discuss the taking of Joseph. As always, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you did enjoy this. I did. Have a wonderful rest of the week and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.